Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a completely neutral, evidence-based look at an unprecedented economic warning about artificial intelligence. Our goal here isn't to fuel the hype train. We're going to stick to verified data, official statements, and leading economic research to figure out exactly what is happening in the global labor market right now. Okay, let's dive into this. The central question we're exploring today is this: how credible is the warning that AI could transform the global economy faster than the Industrial Revolution? And, maybe more importantly, what kind of preparations actually make sense before we fully know the scale and timing of that transformation? We're going to separate the cold hard facts from the forecasts to give you a clear picture, totally free of sensationalism. To understand why we're even asking this, you have to look at the sheer weight of a recent coalition. It's honestly staggering. We're talking about over 200 leading minds in economics and technology, including exactly 16 Nobel laureates, coming together to issue a unified warning. This isn't some fringe group predicting the apocalypse. These are mainstream economists and tech executives explicitly urging governments to start preparing our institutions for a massive transition, and to do it right now. We'll be looking at 6 key areas today. First, the Act Now warning. Then, the Industrial Revolution comparison. Third, what current evidence actually shows. Fourth, where experts disagree. Fifth, preparing for the transition. And finally, the reality of the velocity gap. Section 1, the Act Now warning. Let's unpack exactly what this July 2026 statement claims, and just as importantly, what it deliberately avoids claiming. To keep things grounded, we've broken down the current landscape of AI's economic impact into a pretty straightforward matrix. First up, we have confirmed facts, like a 3.8% contraction in youth hiring in certain sectors. Then we have claims, like the idea that this will be a much larger transformation than the Industrial Revolution. We've also got disputed areas, like the exact timelines for when or if mass unemployment might hit. And finally, the unknowns, particularly the long-term share of wages in the overall economy. Keeping these buckets distinct is absolutely crucial for our analysis. This brings us to the statement itself, which was organized by the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. It's remarkably concise, literally just 88 words. Notice the deliberate phrasing here. AI may become radically more powerful. It's asking economists, policymakers, and tech leaders to build the incentives and institutions to steer AI in a direction that complements humans. The big takeaway? It doesn't declare that widespread job destruction is a certainty today. Instead, it's an urgent request to build up our institutional capacity before the technology fully scales. Basically, the window to prepare is right now. Moving on to Section 2, the Industrial Revolution comparison. Why are some of the most prominent economists alive today drawing direct parallels between AI and the historical shifts of the 18th and 19th centuries? Well, to understand the comparison, we have to look back at a historical phenomenon known as Engels' pause. From roughly 1790 to 1840, total economic output in Britain shot up by 46%. But median working class wages, they barely budged, creeping up just 12% over a 50-year period. Capital owners captured almost all of those productivity gains, while displaced workers literally waited generations for new, higher-paying tasks to emerge. The coalition's warning highlights the very real risk that AI productivity gains could follow this exact pattern, concentrating wealth at the very top while leaving labor behind for an extended stretch. And this brilliantly illustrates the core of their concern, the velocity gap. Think about it. The first industrial revolution relied on physical capital. You had to build factories, lay train tracks, ship materials. That naturally throttled the speed of adoption. But the AI revolution, it relies on digital APIs. Once a model is trained, it can be deployed globally at near zero marginal cost. The fear is that the rapid digital spread of AI might compress a 50-year disruption, like Engels' pause, into a shocking 10-year window, completely outpacing our institutions' ability to adapt. For the average worker, this means the safety net just might not catch up in time. Let's jump to Section 3, what current evidence shows. We're stepping away from the forecasts now to look strictly at hard, observable employment data as of mid-2026. Now, what's really interesting about this data is the stark contrast. The Stanford and ADP Canaries dashboard, which tracks millions of actual payroll records, shows a 3.8% annualized employment contraction for early career workers, specifically those aged 22 to 25, in highly AI-exposed occupations. Compare that to a 2% growth in unexposed entry-level roles. So aggregate mass unemployment isn't happening right now. But beneath the surface, AI is aggressively absorbing the basic task-level work that has traditionally served as the training ground for junior white-collar workers. But we also have to remember that enterprise deployment isn't just a smooth, frictionless curve up and to the right. Looking back at mid-2026, while regions like the Czech Republic were heavily investing in AI infrastructure in May, by June, the U.S. Department of Commerce suddenly used export controls to unilaterally suspend global access to Anthropic's Claude Fable 5 model due to a cyber vulnerability. It was offline for 19 days before being redeployed on July 1st. This just proves that the path from technical capability to economy-wide deployment is highly fragile and definitely subject to sudden regulatory roadblocks. Despite that friction, though, enterprise adoption is accelerating, just very unevenly. It's fascinating to see that in 2025, nearly 50% of firms in the highly industrialized Czech Republic reported using generative AI. That vastly outpaces the broader European Union average of 37%. So the technology is undeniably spreading, but its integration is highly localized, depending a lot on regional infrastructure and industrial strategy. Section 4, where experts actually disagree. Because when looking at this exact same labor data, leading economic camps arrive at some very competing viewpoints. The current debate splits in a few key directions. First, you have the urgent preparation view, which is held by the coalition, pushing for system overhauls right now before disruption scales. Contrast that with the augmentation view. This leans on the Jevons paradox, suggesting AI will actually lower service costs and create new demand and new jobs rather than destroying them. Then there's the distributional risk view, championed by experts like Darren Acemoglu, which warns of an inherently K-shaped economy where inequality just explodes. And finally, the policy caution camp fears that premature, heavy-handed regulation could stifle innovation and actually deprive aging economies of the productivity gains they desperately need. Moving to Section 5, preparing for the transition. Let's objectively examine the institutional solutions being proposed to manage this potential disruption. So the crucial point is that there's no magic bullet here. Every proposed policy carries massive implementation constraints. Universal basic income could provide a financial floor, sure, but funding it could cost 20 to 30% of a nation's GDP. Expanding employee ownership, like ESOPs, directly builds wealth for workers, but it's incredibly hard to scale across gig economies and small businesses. And active labor market policies, like state-funded retraining, make theoretical sense, but historically, they've shown some deeply concerning low efficacy when it comes to actually matching displaced workers to high-paying future roles. On top of that, the distributional effects globally could be really severe. Advanced economies generally have the high digital infrastructure needed to capture the massive productivity gains AI promises. Developing economies, on the other hand, face a much higher risk. They have heavy exposure to automation in business process outsourcing roles, but they currently lack the massive data centers and reliable energy grids required to reap the economic rewards, meaning they might experience the disruptive shocks of AI way faster than the benefits. This matters to all of us because a localized tech boom could trigger massive global economic ripples. Section 6, the velocity gap reality. Let's summarize how AI capability actually stacks up against our economic governance. Remember, while AI technical capabilities are advancing exponentially, economic disruption is not instantaneous. We're facing massive physical and institutional friction. Energy grids and data center capacities are hitting their absolute limits. As we've seen, state actors will use abrupt regulatory interventions and export controls. And corporate adoption is slowed down by deep concerns over legal liability, data privacy, and, honestly, simple organizational inertia. These bottlenecks mean we do have a window to adapt, but that window is entirely dependent on this friction. Ultimately, our analytical assessment of the evidence available today leads to this core conclusion. The data does not support complacency, but it also doesn't support panic. What it does demand is immediate institutional readiness. The uncertainty about AI's ultimate economic timeline, whether mass disruption happens in 3 years or 15 years, is no longer a valid excuse for delaying reforms in our tax, education, and labor systems. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to consider. Will our institutions evolve quickly enough to ensure AI complements human work and broadens prosperity rather than amplifying inequality? The technology is absolutely advancing. The real test is whether our governance can keep pace.